and it's their intrinsic
nature. This food basically robs.
Sound feasible, sound like reptilians. They are everywhere. You can't study antiquity and not find these serpents all over the place. It is serpent, reptilian symbology everywhere in the ancient world. You got statues of snakes. You have stories about these serpents being worshipped. You have stories of dragons. You have a whole culture that worship serpents and dragons. It's all over the place. You know, the Thai, the India, and in Thailand, they worship the Nagas. In China as well, they worship the Nagas, the serpent gods. These were supposed to be serpent gods. When they showed depictions of them, you got statues of them shape-shifted, showing half human, half man. I was in Thailand, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. I took a picture next to one of them because, you know, I knew what they was talking about. So it's everywhere. It's all throughout the ancient world. It's in Egypt, as we're going to get into. It's all in Africa. It's everywhere, the worship of these serpent beings, these dragons, whichever one you want to call them, they are still reptilians. Now we know in the Chinese culture, they have the year of the dragon. The last year of the dragon was in 2012. It just passed not too long ago. But they worship the dragon. We know they have all kinds of festivals and dances and everything. But also when you look at the Chinese zodiac, the Chinese zodiac is called the Shinzao. When you look at the Shinzao, the Chinese zodiac, you see a dragon. A dragon is on there. Now the thing is, everything else on that zodiac exists. We can find it, we know it exists, except for that dragon. The thing is, you know, if dragons are supposed to be mythological creatures and these serpents are supposed to be mythological creatures, how come they were worshipped? They are worshipped more in Chinese culture than any other animal on the zodiac. They are highly worshipped still to this day, and in the ancient world when we find it. So we can't look at the whole reptilian thing and just blow it off. And I never did. It's this information that I always had that I'm giving to you now. I'm way past this information. I'm just putting it out now to relate to you what you need to research. The reptilian thing is something that you can't run away from. Now, this David Icke who's talking about it, I'm gonna get into him because he's a misleader, plain and simple, but I will get into that later. But these reptilians, all over the place, you can't escape them. You can't escape the symbology. You can't escape the history of it in the ancient world. So we know the Chinese talk about them a lot. They worship them. We know that 13 is the unlucky number in Chinese culture. And when you look at the Zodiac, they have 12 signs, just like we have 12 signs of the Zodiac. But there is a 13th sign of the Zodiac, and it's called Ophiuchus. Now, Ophiuchus is basically the serpent bearer, and he would be the 13th sign of the Zodiac. And when we look at the 13th sign in our culture, we know it's the sun is there on the cross of the Zodiac. And they basically moved the sun and put Jesus on the cross. Now, the whole thing is when you go back and look before Christianity, you find a serpent on the cross. Now, when you look at this old 16th century depiction, this German depiction of a coin, one side you have Jesus on the cross, the other side you have a serpent on the cross. We know in the Bible, Moses puts a serpent on the cross. Now, when you read, I think it's Numbers 21:9, Moses put a serpent on the cross. Then in John 3:14, it says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man, Jesus, be lifted up. So just like the serpent was on the cross, when Moses put the serpent on the cross, it's basically foreshadowing Jesus being placed on the cross. So as I said, you can't blow things off. You can't look at stuff and say somebody is crazy. You have to research things. And like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, over 15 years now. And 15 years. And it never ceased to amaze me how much people don't know, or how much information people blow off, or the traps that people fall into when it comes to this information. The reptilian is more prevalent in what's going on in this world than anything else. And that's just a fact. And when we finish this video, you are really going to understand that more than anything. So now, the word serpent or serpent is mentioned in the Bible over 40 times. Also, reptile and dragon is mentioned in the Bible. But we know we always find serpent and we find dragon, and we see that Satan is referred to as a serpent and a dragon. So we find this throughout the Bible. So now, since we know the Bible stole from Kemet, we know it stole from Egypt. What does Egypt say about these reptilians? Where do we find this serpent or these dragons in the Egyptian culture? Now, when you go look there, we find gods. We find serpent, we find reptilian gods, serpent gods all throughout Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Now, here we have Heket. Now, Heket is the Egyptian god of fertility. When you look at depictions of Heket, when you see her hieroglyphics or you see drawings of her, she's not a reptile, she's not reptilian, but she is amphibious, she's a frog. But why a frog? Because frogs have tadpoles. And when you look at a tadpole, it almost looks like a seed or a sperm going to fertilize an egg. That's what it resembles when you take a look at it. But Heket, when you look at some of her hieroglyphics, you can see her sitting with nymph. Now, nymph in this depiction, she's sitting with, and they are basically making man. They are molding man. This is a very important depiction right here you need to pay attention to. Now, you have nymph and you have Heket molding man, and this is going to be very important as we go along. So now we know the Greeks stole from Kemet. We know they stole from ancient Egypt. We know when you start studying Greek mythology, when you start studying Greek antiquity, you start looking back at these Greek gods. A lot of them correspond with Egyptian gods. They basically took the deities from Egypt and they basically changed their names and created deities that fit who they really are, who the Greeks really are. We're going to show who they really are. Now, here we have agathodaimon. It says, known in Egypt as the protector god of Alexandria, whose sanctuary was apparently founded by Alexander himself. The oldest evidence for this cult is a passage from the Potter's Oracle, 130 BC, where agathodaimon is identified with the primeval snake nymph. Now, I just showed you nymph with Heket, a whole depiction of them two making man on the potter's wheel. Now it says, for the rest, the cult was confined to Alexandria and is only known from the Roman period. The worship of agathodaimon as a prospective house snake appears to have a Greek origin further. He mainly appears in Greek literature. So here we have this snake, a serpent, who is being attributed to nymph, who is another Egyptian deity. So this all going to come together, trust me, it's all going to make sense. But this is just a part. You're going to find this so much in Greek antiquity and in Greek mythology that they have basically stolen deities from ancient Egypt and changed them to fit who they are. Okay, so agathodaimon is associated with nymph. Now, when you look at agathodaimon, it's a depiction of a serpent, of a snake. Now, when I showed you the depiction of nymph, you can see that it's a ram. That's nymph there speaking with Heket. It's a ram. So why do they have this serpent, as a representation of this ram, this Egyptian god nymph? So who exactly is nymph? Nymph is the Egyptian god of creation. This is why you see nymph with Heket fashioning man on the potter's wheel. It's creating man. So they took the representation of nymph, this goat or this ram, and switched it with this serpent. And there's a reason for that that's going to become clear. But when you read for nymph, it says here, in Egyptian mythology, nymph was originally the breath of life, his name meaning soul breath. Indeed, according to Plutarch and Diodorus, nymph was identical with the Greek pneuma. Pneuma means basically a breath of life. Nymph, in this context, was a spirit that breathed life into things, giving them form. Nymph eventually became considered to be the creator god himself in Elephantine, although his identity was finally assimilated into the more important god Amen. So, again, you got this serpent, agathodaimon, representing Nymph, this creation, this creator god, this Egyptian god of creation. So it's going to be more clear why they did that. Now, the whole thing is, as I pointed out, we can see that they're going to be stealing a lot of Egyptian gods and deities and making them fit who they are. So now this is another depiction of Nymph. It's an egg with wings. This is actually a Masonic symbol. When you see this a lot of times, it's dealing in Freemasonry and they use it. Serpents, snakes have eggs. They lay eggs. Reptiles lay eggs. Humans do not. So now what does this go back to? This all goes back to Genesis. It goes back to the Garden of Eden. Now understand that you have two creations, as I have pointed out. The first creation is this normal creation, but the second creation is something different. It's different altogether. You had basically God forming man from the dust of the ground, not creating man normally. So what was Nymph's name? Soul breath, the breath of life. What did God do in the Bible? He breathed the breath of life into this dust and gave it life. This is why the Greeks took this symbol and switched it with the serpent, which is going to become more clear later, because they're taking the Egyptian depiction of fashioning man and putting their spin on it like they do everything, and is representing them, as you will see shortly. So now we know who was deceived by the serpent. Eve. Eve was deceived by the serpent. So it's more into her being deceived than we know. So now, if you've seen my video, That's Game, the Bible and Christianity Finally Explained, if you made it all the way to the end of that long video, it was about 6 hours, then you understood how everything came together at the end. All the secrets start coming out. Everything started to make sense. Now, I said in the video, and I showed that the parable of the Bible, almost every parable, when you started to decipher it and figure them out, they all go back to ancient Egypt. You know, the Garden of Eden story is no different. The symbology here, as we can see, goes back to ancient Egypt. When you see in the Bible, it's saying God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So when you find out that it corresponds to an Egyptian god Nymph, whose name is breath of life, and when he breathes the breath of life, he's giving form to something, you can see where the Bible got that from. It's the same depiction, the same thing. It's in the Garden of Eden story. So the whole Adam and Eve story is symbolic. It's symbolic of the snake, the serpent, what it's talking about here in Greek mythology. So Eve being deceived by the snake, then passing it to man is something we're going to get into later, because that has, you know, huge implications when you read it, what it's saying. So now when you realize that Noah is a descendant, he comes from the line of Adam and Eve. Now remember, if you look at a lot of the depictions of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, we can see that in some of the depictions, the serpent is shape-shifting. It's half like human, half snake, wrapped around a tree. It's showing that symbolizes shape-shifting for people who don't know. It's shape-shifting. It's half serpent, half human. So when you go into the book of Enoch, it's saying here, he is not human, but resembling the offspring of the angels of heaven, is of a different nature from ours, being altogether unlike to us. So could Noah have been a reptilian? So when they seen him, could he have been a reptilian? Now we know they say his skin was white, but that's symbology. But it also says that he is not human. So we know white people look human when you see white people. So we can't say, well, he was a white person. It's symbolic of the serpents mating with the albinos of the African people. That is the parable here if you did not get it, and it's going to make sense as we go along. So the whole thing is, whoever, the person who created this book of Enoch, they created specifically for you to use with the King James Version, with the Bible. I'm clear of that. Anybody who studies it knows it. So you have to take the parables that is showing you in the King James Version as well as in the book of Enoch, and you can do your comparison. So it's the symbology here is these serpents, whatever you want to call them, reptilians, made it with the offspring of the children of men. So they made it with basically the albinos of the African race and created something else. We're going to get into that. So now for anybody who may be confused, let me make it a little bit more clear to understand. The first creation that I was referring to in the Bible, the first creation, male and female created he, them, those first people, that is symbolic of just normal creation. Now, when I said that represents African people, that's because we are the first people and everybody came from us, all other races. So look at this first creation as the creation of African people and everybody that came from us, including the albino or the white man. So let's just say this creation represents all races of people on the planet. The second creation is symbolizing a different creation, something that is, fabricated, something that is, different. It's different from our normal creation. You see, it formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. This is why it's saying that it fashioned man. This is a different creation, separate from natural or normal creation. So when the Greeks introduced the serpent into this, and they did so by switching nymph with the agathodaimon, the serpent, that's symbology here. Now take that symbology, that serpent symbology, it goes to the Garden of Eden where we have the serpent. Now you have a deception that happens there with the woman and this serpent. That is symbology of what I'm going to get into later that's going to make more sense. And she passes it to man. But I'm going to get into that later, and we'll come back to this, and it's going to all make a lot more sense. I'm not saying that these serpents or aliens or somebody else created the white race. No, they came from us, period. It's a lot of people who hate white people who want to believe that, aliens created them or, they are some kind of alien race. And, you got some white people themselves who believe that. No, can't escape it. We are the mother and father of all races on this planet, period, point blank. There's no way around that.
One more important piece of the puzzle was found in 2005, when cancer researcher Keith Chang was studying the black and white stripes of zebrafish.
There are a lot of zebrafish in my laboratory because I'm a geneticist and I study how mutations occur, which is how cancer occurs. And I use pigmentation to detect those mutations. By chance, the light skin-colored fish that I used for that research also taught us a lot about how humans became lighter skinned.
What Professor Chang discovered was perhaps one of the most important genetic mutations ever found. A single change among literally billions of coded instructions within zebrafish DNA that reduced black pigment from their stripes. Soon after, this identical genetic mutation was found in fair-skinned Europeans.
There was a magic moment in this research. When I got back the results that showed that the number and the size and the amount of pigment in the light-skinned zebrafish were all diminished, and the same thing happened in humans. When I opened the textbook and saw that same thing, I began to sweat. Not only did light-skinned people evolve from black-skinned people, but lighter-skinned people, whether they're European or whether they're Asian, like me, were actually mutants of the dark-skinned people.
This was remarkable because we had only inferred on the basis of circumstantial evidence that this must have occurred in evolution, but we didn't have any concrete genetic evidence. Now we do.
Now, let me tell you how you can prove this. And this is how you gotta really dig deep and do critical thinking. If an alien race created white people to somehow, let's say, rule us, why would they not give the white people technology? Why wouldn't they give them the information that they need? Understand, we can prove this in history. All throughout history in the ancient world, you have every race coming into Kemet